Hi, everybody. It's Mama Kay coming back at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And today I have a fantastic person that I'm interviewing that probably started working with and really getting to know about 20 years ago when she would hire me to be a flute clinician for her high school band program. She is not only a fantastic educator, a clarinetist, but really somebody who did a crazy job in the summers that I don't think I could have handled without passing out. So she has got incredible stamina as well. So she is the whole package. Without further ado, special guest, who are you?
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Dawson, and I am the Director of Bands at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. I spent the better part of my career teaching high school in Winnipeg at Vincent Massey Collegiate, and am currently directing ensembles, concert band, wind ensemble, teaching band techniques courses, and teaching graduate students in conducting at the University of Manitoba.
How long have you been at the university?
I just completed my 4th year in that position.
Were you involved with the university beforehand?
Yes, I had done some sessional work for the university for the Faculty of Education, as well as the School of Music, now Faculty of Music. Did a sabbatical replacement for the current the Director of Bands at the time, and have been involved with being a faculty advisor for student teachers, and as well, of course, hosting student teachers for a number of years at my schools.
That was a great way to sort of get your feet wet before making that leap.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So I would love to know what your musical journey was to get you there from baby Jackie all the way until you went into university as a student.
Oh, wow. So I'm from Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, where I had all of my early music training. I only moved to Manitoba in 1997 after I got my first teaching position in Brandon. So that was what brought me to Manitoba from Newfoundland. I was a very eager, willing to go anywhere teacher, wasn't going to sit around too long waiting for a job. So I started band in grade 5, actually. And I played in the school band right through grade 12 when I decided to go into music and study clarinet. One of my favorite, journey stories is that my band director in grade 5, Joe, you'll love this, I started on flute.
No way.
Yeah, totally. And I was terrible. And I remember it to this day. We would be lined up in front of a mirror, and we would have the head joint and checking our embouchures and trying to make those first sounds. And I was horrified because I couldn't get a clear sound on the flute. And I was just devastated. And I would just get that, air, and I couldn't get a tone. And it just, you're 10, 11 years old and you're so self-conscious and paranoid. And I tried and tried and tried, and then I was going to quit. I was just like, no, it's not for me. I'm not going to do band. And my teacher at the time convinced me to try clarinet instead. And that was a perfect fit. And, I had no problem, took off on clarinet and never looked back, obviously. But it's interesting that I was on the verge of just calling it quits. I can't do this. I can't make a sound. And then it all turned around. So I always credit that teacher for finding a way.
Sometimes that's all it takes, right? Is just
Yeah.
that one little switch. How long do you let the kids, I don't like to use the word struggle, but it is like you need to work through it, right? And sometimes it's just practicing a little bit differently or just giving yourself that time to learn that new skill. But sometimes it's just, no, you need to try something else. And good for your teacher for being that aware.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a neat memory. Yeah.
Did you take any music beforehand in elementary school, or was being in band sort of your exposure?
Yeah, there was a really strong culture of music education in St. John's. You were always in the school choir. I started taking piano lessons in grade 1, I think. So I always had those experiences and started developing my skills at a very young age. So between piano lessons, school choir, recorder, and then school band starting in grade 5, there's a lot of very informative early years behind everything leading up to wanting to study music in university.
So what lit that fire for you wanting to go into music as a career?
Um, you know, I can't, my school had a really strong band program, a really strong tradition and culture of music at my school. So it was kind of part of the culture and part of the, I guess, the fabric of your experiences, and always, uh, I guess, they were very engaging and always very inspiring experiences. So they always kept that fire lit. And then I started taking clarinet lessons in grade 8. And I decided at that point I was going to take piano anymore, switch to clarinet, and studied clarinet very intensely at a fairly young age, grade 8, but grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, and did all the festivals and the competitions and all those sorts of things. But interestingly, by the end of grade 11, early grade 12, I had decided, and the more people assumed I was going to do music, the more I decided I wasn't. And I had my sights set on going into physiotherapy. So for the latter part of high school, I was not going into music. I was doing physiotherapy. And the more people talked to me about this decision and why aren't you doing music, the more I dug my heels in and said, no, I'm not. And I always call it the grade 12 epiphany, because it happens all the time. And even now, as someone who's working with students coming into university, I'm always really sensitive and aware and patient with those students who make the decision last minute, because I was that grade 12 epiphany where, after the deadline, after it was, auditions were set up and everything, I was cleaning my clarinet out after a rehearsal in grade 12, and I just went, oh, what am I doing? I have to do music. I have to do music. And I ran into my band director's office and I have to do music. I have to do music. And it was just this, literally a light bulb. And he's like, okay, calm down, I'll call over. And so it would be like someone calling me now, which happens to me all the time. I'll get a phone call or an email from, some teacher saying, I've got this student and they've kind of decided, no worries, we'll look after it. So it happens, right?
Isn't that great that you've got that perspective, though, to come to those situations with that understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of neat because I really do identify. And I did, every year I'll have one or two teachers call me in a bit of a panic saying, I have this great grade 12 student and, they thought about it, but then they decided not to, but now they're really regretting it, but they're afraid it's too late. And can they still get an audition? And, right away, of course, I identify and say, oh yeah, we can work with it. So yeah.
So now you and I have a few other connections too. I'll talk about the other one in a second. I just zoned in and now I got to refocus. So before you came to Manitoba to teach, you were involved, and I sort of alluded to it in the introduction of you were involved in something called a ceremonial guard.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's where you met my partner, Chris.
That's right. And in fact, it was my experiences at the Band of the Ceremonial Guard from 1994 to 1996, being in Ottawa those summers, that I met some of my greatest lifelong music friends, if you will, from all over the country. And it just so happens that Manitoba had strong representation in that band. And I met so many wonderful friends, colleagues, in that band. And Chris and I did basic training together. And
if that doesn't bond you, I don't know what would.
Right? Exactly. And I did basic training with so many people from here in Manitoba. A very dear friend and colleague who's now the director of the Royal Canadian Air Force Band, Matt Clark. We were very close friends through basic training. Daryl Crisp became a very, very close friend. And in fact, so then fast forward a few years after Ceremonial Guard, when I was looking for work, it was Daryl who I contacted, and she gave me the names and phone numbers of some, well-respected, well-established band directors here in Manitoba, and said, call these people. If there's a job, they'll know about it. And that is how I got my foot in the door here and came here. So I really do attribute it to my connections at CG.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful meeting place of all these fabulous musicians from all over the country.
So what was your first job when you got here then?
I was at Vincent Massey Brandon.
Oh, I'd forgotten you started in Brandon. Right,
Yeah,
right, right, right.
yeah, yeah. That was my first gig. So I moved here for that job. I was teaching alongside Brent Campbell, and I was teaching band and choir and social studies. So it was 0.75, and I was teaching junior high band, grade 9 jazz band, junior choir, senior vocal jazz, and grade 8 social studies. And it wasn't even full time. Yeah, it
What a
was insane.
mix.
It was insane.
You
Yeah.
must have been exhausted.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy first job. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And so I was there 1 year. Yeah.
And then where did you move from there?
And then I went to the comp in Selkirk, Lord Selkirk Regional, and I was there for 2 years. And when I went there, I was teaching band and choir as well, high school, but just high school now. And it was all, it was basically 50-50 band choir. And also we implemented a music history, music theory program. And Jeff was teaching the music theory side, and I was teaching the music history side. So
That's Jeff
it was great.
Johnson, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a neat experience at designing and implementing this music history course, which is there to this day. Yeah.
And then is that when you moved to Winnipeg after?
And then I was there 2 years, and then that's when I went to Vincent Massey Collegiate, and I was there for 16 years. So, and then I taught a year in Newfoundland before I came out. So all told, I was 20 years in public school.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Sometimes you need a little, you're looking for a little bit of a change, but you still want to stick with music, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So now the thing that distracted me is, tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to feel like a bit of a bozo if I'm wrong, but I noticed the necklace that you're wearing today.
Yes.
And is that who I think it's for?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So that is a very special necklace for a friend of ours named Cheryl. And I think that's all we need to say about that. So just sending out Cheryl some little extra love. And I'm actually interviewing Cheryl tomorrow.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
So yeah, very, very special.
Yeah.
So now over all of these years of teaching, and of course, remembering that it's a family show, what would you say would be one of the strangest gigs or jobs that you've ever been involved with?
I thought about that when you mentioned that question. I honestly can't think of anything really strange. I mean, playing in the band of the ceremonial guard for 3 years does lead you to all sorts of interesting gigs and trips and events. And I would say for sure there were a lot of strange, I mean, I don't know if strange would be the word, but yeah, very festive. Very festive time.
Well said.
But as a clarinetist, you know, I think everything was pretty straight ahead. I was trying to think, you know, did I ever have to play out in the extreme cold? I mean, extreme heat for sure in those summers in Ottawa. Was there anything really out of the ordinary? And there isn't anything I can think of. My year in Brandon, I was in a folk group with Jana Starling and Mindy Campbell. I don't know if any of these names ring a bell, and Maria Guidos and Carla Ferguson. We were in this group. I wasn't part of the founding group, but they invited me to join after I moved to Brandon. But we were called the Kitchen Women, and it was all folk music, and we played clarinets and recorders and guitars and mandolin and accordion, and some of the girls arranged these songs, and we did some gigs. And so I have this really weird little blip in my history where I was this folky and played the Brandon Folk Festival, and we would go up in Neepawa and play in these little bed and breakfasts. And so those were, you know, there's a different time in my life where I think back and go, and I was singing and playing recorder and penny whistle, and yeah.
That sounds like a total riot.
Yeah, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. We just did it for the hoot, right? And we made a CD. We recorded.
Do you still have a copy?
I do. Yeah, The Kitchen Women.
That may have to come out.
Yeah, and it's great music. It's great music. And we did things representative of different parts of Canada and different folk cultures. And it was really neat. Yeah.
Have you heard of Alexis's group?
Pardon me?
Have you heard of the name of Alexis's group?
No.
The Mom Jeans.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
think I have heard that. Yeah.
Anyways, you were saying?
No, and so yeah, that would probably be one of the more interesting parts of my musical journey, I suppose. A little bit of a departure from, a traditional wind band conductor. Yeah.
So if there are any students watching, what sort of advice do you have if they're thinking about going into music as a career?
Yeah, I have this conversation nonstop with prospective, current students, outgoing students, because the reality is we go through so many phases of questioning what we've done. And we change direction and we change paths, and it's very fluid. It's not, this perfect, I made the decision, I followed through with it, my path was clear cut, I knew where I was going, I knew how I was going to get there, I knew what I wanted it to look like. The reality is this is an ever evolving thing. And I think a couple of things. We have to be patient with the ups and downs of the evolution, because I say this to my students all the time. You're in the early days, especially, you're going to have more days probably where you second guess or wonder, are you good enough? Are you capable? Are you equipped? Do you have what it takes? And you're going to feel run down, and you're going to second guess, and especially in those early days of a first job where you're trying to establish the relationships and establish the culture and establish your identity, not just your own, but your identity within that climate. And I think it's acknowledging that it's not straight through. There's a lot of evolution and ups and downs, and being patient with that, and not being too hard on oneself about what's going on, and being okay with identifying those challenges. So I think that's one thing, is recognizing that is going to happen, and they're going to be tough days. I think the other thing too, a student once said this to me many, many years ago. When your students thank you or give you a card or give you a little speech and say something nice. And this one student I remember saying years ago, she said, "Thank you for loving what you do and sharing what you love." And I think that stuck with me now for 20 years or whatever, however long ago it was the student said that to me. And that's what I believe. I think you have to love what you do, and you have to share what you love and impart that. And I believe when our students recognize it and believe in it, it's authentic. When you share it, when they know you love it and you share it and impart it, it's contagious. So I think that's one thing I would say to any students: just do what you love, and then share what you love. And you're going to be happy.
And students know when we're being authentic. They can sniff us out in a second if they know that if we're not in it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the other thing I would say to students too is be yourself. It's so important, of course, to learn and be inspired and to grow and adopt practices of others and adopt ideas, and to embrace what others have to offer, of course, because that's filling our toolbox, and that's equipping us with great knowledge and skills and wisdom. And we, of course, don't want to negate that. But within that, I think it's so important not to try to be someone else, not to try to recreate someone else's world, because it won't work. You have to be yourself and create your world and create your identity and your voice. And then that is what makes you unique and special, and creates this motivation and inspiration and love with your students and your programs. And so I think it's very, very important for students to be themselves and to be okay with who they are, and not think that, oh, well, look at that person, look at how good at they are at this and this and this, and then I need to be more like that. No, you need to be you, but still embrace all those things, but still at the core, be you. And
I think it's really scary. I remember being very, very nervous when I first started doing flute clinics, and then when I became a band director, because you want to be as good as everybody else you see around you, right? And so you figured that that's the only way to success, and that is truly the way to failure.
Yeah.
right? And I became so much more successful when I just really embraced who I was, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what raises the authenticity and the vulnerability of what we do too, because you can't be vulnerable when you're pretending to be someone you're not. You just can't. It just doesn't work. So you just have to be who you are, and they'll love you for it. And I think that's what truly, that's where you see authentic community come to be, is when everyone, and then students realize too, I think then that gives them license permission to be okay with being themselves, because they know they're unconditionally embraced and accepted for who they are. And when their leader, their teacher, the person who's guiding them on this journey exhibits those moral fibers and that sense of, and that way of being, then they right away know they can be themselves, and they're not being judged, and they don't have to try to be someone they're not. And I think that's what our young people need more than anything. They need to know they are just fine just the way they are, and we're going to take them where they need to go just the way they are.
I think those are really great words of advice, no matter what profession somebody is in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So my last question to you, Miss Jackie Dawson, do you have any other worldly words of advice in these weird times? Maybe some things that you're leaning on right now to sort of keep pushing you through?
I think one thing we're probably all recognizing and we're all faced with right now is this notion of realizing what you have, and then when it's not there, really noticing the impact of this rich daily life we have. You know, we get to go to these great jobs and work with these wonderful people, and in our case, in our profession, make music all day. And then when all of a sudden that's gone, you really recognize how valuable it is. So I think I'm probably just preaching to the choir and echoing the sentiment everyone's feeling right now, is that when we have that back, we're sure going to embrace it and be grateful for it, and probably never complain ever again about a long day or a bad rehearsal or a bad meeting or whatever. I think we're going to just be so grateful to be back in our worlds. And I think right now, just almost like an anxious anticipation that we will be back and it will be great. And it's unfortunate that we have this lull in that time, but maybe it's a time to continue to be grateful and recognize that we're just so fortunate to do what we do, and just continue to try to be as grateful as we can each day, and just know we'll be back in that seat again soon, and probably really appreciate it all the more.
Well, Jackie, I am so grateful that you decided to take time out of your day today to share your story and just your awesome Jackiness. I can't wait to see you in person again.
Oh,
Just to
I
be
know.
able to like give you a hug and
I
just
know.
be with my people.
I know. I know. It's very, very strange. And I think, yeah, everyone's longing for the connection. And again, another example of, you get so used to just seeing everybody everywhere, and oh, that's so, but I think now when everybody sees each other again, it's going to be like seeing them for the first time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope
Great.
you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me, Joanne. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you.
Thanks so much. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.